my life is shaped by a lot of events, but one of the most powerful was somebody doing these kind acts for my family. When I was 11 years old, we had a really, really tough Thanksgiving where there was no money and no food, and we wouldn't have starved. We always found a way to get something, but we weren't going to have a Thanksgiving dinner, that's for sure, certainly not a feast of any sort. And my mom and dad at the time were fighting like cats and dogs and saying things that once you say them, you can never take them back. You know the kind of stuff I'm talking about? And my mom was screaming at father about how he couldn't even take care of his own family, and it was horrible. And I have a younger brother and younger sister. I'm the oldest. So I was trying to keep them from hearing this conversation, and then a miracle happened. Bang on the door. I'm the oldest. They're screaming, so I go answer the door. And I answer the door, and standing there is this giant man. I was this little boy. And he's holding this huge box of food. And beside him on the ground was a black pot with an uncooked turkey in it. And he said, "Is your father home?" And I said, "Just one moment." I was like unbelievably euphoric. I thought, this is a gift from God. This is going to change it all. This is going to make my mom and dad happy. It's going to be unbelievable. So I go, and my father is screaming at my mother through a closed door to the bedroom door. And I said, Dad, there's a guy at the door. And he goes, "You answer the door." I said, "I did. He's got to see you." So I kind of teased. I said, "Dad, you got to come." So he said, "Fine." He made one last yell at her, and he walks to the door. And I'm waiting there, just waiting to see his face. And my dad opens the door, and this man's standing there with this big box of food. And my father did not get happy. He looked at this man, and he raised his voice to him, and he said, "Look, we don't take charity." And then he took the door to slam it in the man's face. But the man was a good-sized man. He put his foot there and smacked his foot and bounced back open. He said, Sir, this is not charity. Everybody has tough times. Somebody knows you're having a tough time. And they want you to have a magical Thanksgiving. I'm just the delivery guy." He said, "Please take this." And my father said, "We don't take charity." He went to slam it again. And this time the guy put his shoulder against it so he couldn't do it. And then my father's staring at him. It's like these two males starting to get in this intense mode. And one just trying to give a gift, and I'm freaking. And then the guy said something that I'll never forget, and in moments I wished he hadn't said. But he found a way to force my father. He's holding this thing, and he looked at me, and then he looked at my dad, and he said, "Don't make your family suffer because of your ego." Now my dad's level of energy increased, but he was also trapped. You get it? So he took the food, slammed it on our table, and slammed the door in the man's face and never even thanked him. And I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to cry. Part of me was crushed. And I watched my father storm off and went on back to scream at my mother. And I remember that day just thinking, I don't understand. And years later, I began to understand it a little bit. What I began to understand is that you look at a person's life, and it's like so much in life you could be joyous about. Like I wanted to smile, you know what I mean? Even now I can remember it. I wanted to smile about this great gift, but now I couldn't even smile because it would make him angry. And then I thought, years I figured out, our whole life is shaped by decisions. That's what we've talked about today, right? But there's 3 decisions you're making every moment you're alive. And the way you make these 3 decisions shapes your destiny. First decision we're all making every moment is, what are you going to focus on? What are you going to focus on? And, I realized that my father's life and my life ended up very different because we made that day 3 decisions very differently. He decided to focus on the fact that he has not fed his family. And the second question you got to decide, every moment you're alive, including this moment, what are you going to focus on? The second question is, as you're focusing on, what does this mean? What does it mean? And the bottom line on meaning is, if you think about it, you get to make up the meaning, and most people pick the worst one, don't they? That day, my father decided to focus on the fact he hadn't fed his family, and I know what meaning he gave because he said it out loud over and over again, that he was worthless because he had not taken care of his family. And then the final, most important decision you make every moment you're alive, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? And I'll tell you what he decided to do. He decided to leave our family shortly thereafter, which at the time was the worst experience of my life. It was the most crushing experience I felt. It's been so many years now, I don't have the same feelings. And part of it is 3 years ago he passed away. But at the time, I knew no greater pain. My family knew no greater pain. I couldn't understand why he would leave. I loved him so much. And my life turned out very different than him. I was the only one to go at his funeral. No one else in the family would go. Nobody wanted to be part of it. He died alone of a disease called connective tissue disorder. And I can tell you, right before his death, he got the lesson because he looked at me and he said, son, he said, I was a bastard. I didn't connect with anybody, and look what I'm dying of. It's unbelievable. So that same day, I made 3 different decisions. I decided to focus on the fact there was food. What a concept. I like that. But what changed my life was the meaning I gave it. I decided that day that what this means is that strangers care. And if strangers care about me and my family, I decided what I was going to do is I was going to care about strangers. And that completely changed my life. I promised myself someday I'd do well enough to do this for other families like was done for me. And I didn't wait till I was, wealthy to do it. I did my first one when I was 17. I remembered I was 17, I had my own car, I had some money, and I decided to go on the greatest shopping spree of my life at that point. I decided I was going to go shop for 2 families for Thanksgiving, and I was going to go do for families what was done for me so many years before. It was the most euphoric experience. I took 2 baskets, I went to the manager of the place, and I told him what I was going to do, and I said, I want you to give me a discount, you be my partner, give me 10%, cheap bastard. Right? But it was so cool. I got 2 of everything, right? Because I wanted to get enough food for a family for 2 or 3 days and have an unbelievable feast. Then I called this church in the barrio area, and I said, listen, I want to go take care of some families that are too proud to come to the church and get food. So they might suffer. Can you recommend some families? And they gave me 2 families. So then I wrote a note because I thought, you know what? I'm going to put on old jeans and a T-shirt, and I'm going to deliver this. I'm not going to get the acknowledgement, but I do want to see their faces, right? So I'll go as the delivery boy, which is easy. I look like one. But I wrote this note, and I don't want them to get upset like my father did. So I wrote this note, and I said, this is a gift from a friend. Please know that you're loved. I want you to have an extraordinary Thanksgiving. You deserve it. Please accept this gift. And then I put under it, I said, if you can, someday do well enough to do this for one other family and pass on the gift. And I put love a friend. And then I realized I was going to an area that was more Latino, and I don't speak Spanish, so I thought, I got a friend to write on the back in Spanish so I could flip it around if there was a challenge. So I got one of my buddy's old vans, because I need a little room, put all the groceries in, and I drove to this house. And it was not what I expected, it was more. I got to this house, and I got 2 bags of groceries, and I banged on the door. Door opened, and this woman about this tall, right, stares up at me like this, right? And I said, hi. And it was very obvious she didn't speak any English, and she let out a scream when she saw the food. And by the way, this woman had 5 children and a husband. What I didn't know is the husband had left her 3 days before with no money, no food, and 5 kids. So I got these bags. So she screamed, and she grabbed me and started pulling my neck and like kissing me, right? And I said, no. I said, I'm the delivery boy. And she didn't understand a word I was saying. So I reached in my pocket and I gave her the note, flipped it over. She read it in Spanish, and then she started to bawl. So then she came and started kissing me again. I said, no, I'm the delivery boy. I'm, I'm trying to show her. And she goes, no, gift from God, gift from God. I said, I'm trying not to bawl. So I'm like, where do I put this? And I'm doing everything. I hold it together, like smiling, but I want to cry. And she just pointed. It wasn't a big house. It's like a room. So I went over and I put the stuff on there. And just as I'm trying to put stuff on there, I hear these screams. And all of a sudden, bam, bam, 2 boys hit me, one leg, then the other. These 2 little guys just tackle me, right? When they saw the food, they went crazy. When I saw the pumpkin pie, it was over. So I said, come out with me. And so they came out, and we kept bringing these groceries in. And I'm telling you, it was like, I don't know how to describe it. It was the most euphoric, fun, passionate, loving. It was like they're my little brothers, And so we brought all stuff in, and they were laughing, and they were lit up. And then, I'd done it all, and it was time to go, and I didn't want to go, and they didn't want me to go. This one little boy just wouldn't let go of my leg, and he just kept looking up to me and hugging me, and I was like, but I had to go make the other delivery. So I turned to this woman, I said, I've got to go, And she said, okay, whatever her language was. I didn't know what it was, but I knew it meant okay, right? So I went to go leave, and then she grabbed my arm, and she started to have tears in her eyes. And I said, I wanted to say, Happy Thanksgiving, but I didn't know Spanish, so I went, Feliz Navidad. Figured it was close, you know? And she started she went from crying to laughing, right? And then she grabbed and gave me this big hug, and the kids gave me these hugs. And I remember I got out and I walked off, and they were all standing on the porch. And I got in this little van, and I drove it out and I turned it around. And as I went to turn it around, I looked in the rearview mirror, and I was feeling all this emotion building in my body. And I looked in the mirror, and I saw Mama standing in the porch with her kids, all the kids smiling. Mama sitting there crying hysterically and smiling from ear to ear. And I couldn't keep it together. I was right there, stopped in the street, and I started bawling uncontrollably. And I remember just thinking, this is a beautiful thing. Why is this making me cry? And, why is this a great thing? Why am I so emotional about this? And then I got it. I realized in that moment that the worst day of my life, my father leaving, had actually been the best day of my life. Because if I hadn't had that experience, I wouldn't be here today. And now because of that, I'm get to live this life. And I have the desire and the drive and the want to give in this way. And so I've really realized that the worst day was the best day, that was God's gift. The gift wouldn't have been there if he would have stayed. There's an old country song that says, "Thank God for unanswered prayers." It's a story about this man who wants his prayer and finds out later on it wasn't fulfilled, right? So I tell you the story for a couple reasons. One is, if you want to change your life, figure out how your worst day was your best day. It'll change everything, because it is if you look for it. If you find the deeper meaning, it is. There's something in you that wouldn't be there without it. And the second reason is because I want to recruit your soul. Not for your money or business. I want to recruit you in this action of going and making a difference. I want to recruit you for you, because I know if you go do a few of these things, you'll get hooked, and you'll make it a ritual, and it'll change your life. Whatever things you do in your life, this is what it's really about. And, it won't be long before it'll be Thanksgiving here, and we still do this. I start out the first year, I fed 2 families, and the next year I fed 4. I'm going to double it. Next year I did 8, which was a lot of work. And I didn't tell anybody what I was doing, because I wasn't doing it for acknowledgement. I was doing it because it was right. But after a while, I thought I could use some help. So I got my friends together and said, instead of just going and having turkey, let's give thanks. Let's go build baskets with food and great stuff, and let's deliver it to people. Then we'll come in and have a big dinner, and we'll talk about what we're grateful for and have our dinner. And so we did it, and it became a ritual, and it grew. And then I built some companies, and all my employees got involved. And then about 14, 15 years ago, I started my foundation. And last year, we fed over 1 million people now in 9 countries around the world, on Christmas and Thanksgiving. It's been a pretty amazing experience, right? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So I thank you for your applause. I wasn't telling you for that reason. I want to recruit you. And you can give your money, but I'd much prefer if you would just go deliver the food. Because I'll tell you what's great. You'll be changed by that. It's easy to give money. But when you enter an environment and you give, you don't give as the giver. You go as the delivery person, but you're really the one that made it. It'll absolutely change your life. I've always wanted to know the answer to a question. I've been obsessed by the question of what makes the difference in people's lives. I was not popular in school. I loved people. So I was passionate about figuring out what's the difference in people. Why is it that some people are given everything? The type, they really do have parents that love them, that are there for them. They have tremendous educational background. They have all the economic resources, and they end up spending their life going in and out of a rehab. They had all the resources. And then you meet somebody who's been, abused, or no one's been there for them, or they've been physically abused or sexually abused, or the worst things you could possibly happen to a human being. And they turn out to be some of the finest human beings you'd ever meet in your life, who are out there working to help other people and make a difference. So we all want to believe that our lives have turned out because of our biography. And the reality is we can all find people with a horrible biography who have an extraordinary life, and we have people with an extraordinary biography who have a life that none of us would want to trade with. So what's the real challenge? And I believe that the challenge in relationships and in life in every area is emotional fitness. That it starts with how emotionally fit you are in a relationship. And there are patterns that make people emotionally unfit. There are patterns that make people frustrated. There are patterns that make people depressed. There are patterns that make people angry. There are patterns that make people feel sorry for themselves. And there are also patterns that make people compassionate, playful, physically passionate, emotionally strong. You know, there are different patterns, and they stand out to you when you've been around that many people. So I've had now 50 million people get my books and tapes, but I've been with 3 million people face-to-face from 80 countries. And when you're around those many people, the pattern becomes clear. And I've been able to use those patterns, and that's what I want to kind of expose you to tonight. And frankly, you know, I think these patterns are common sense. But, you know, how many of you notice that common sense is not too common? You know, everybody's like, oh, yeah, that's simple. But, you know, a lot of people say, I know this stuff. Well, if you're not doing it, you don't know it. You understand it. And understanding and $3 will almost get you a cup of Starbucks these days, you know? It's really nice to understand things, but that doesn't change anything. You got to get in your body and actually do it. But I've learned enough of these patterns that now, over the last, 20 years or so, of the 30 years of my career, I'm the guy that gets the call when the fire starts. You know, when the athlete is burning down on national television and something's got to be done right now to turn them around. And, I either get them or I don't. And for 30 years, I've gotten them. That's how I've built my reputation. And you've got to produce results right now. And I'm able to do that because of an understanding of these need structures I'm going to talk to you about. Or I get the call when the child is going to commit suicide, or the adult. And in 30 years, knock on wood, I've never lost one suicide in 30 years. That doesn't mean I won't someday, but I never have, not one single time out of the thousands of suicide attempts. And it's again because of understanding these needs I'm going to talk to you about. I get the phone call, in the middle of the night, true story, and it's the President of the United States saying, Tony, they're going to impeach me in the morning. What should I do? And I say, could you have called me sooner? True story, So in the experience of looking to make those changes and looking at how to change, same thing in relationships, couples that are gone, the films that I wanted to make with Chloe, I said, let's not make films with couples that have troubles. Let's make couples that look like they've gone beyond the edge. By anybody's estimate, there's no way to turn it around. Because by that extreme, when someone watches the film, they look at their own life and they go, oh my God, these people can do it. And they did here, I could do it too. That's the contrast we want. But the basis of all that I do comes down to knowing that the difference in your life, your relationship, your physical life, your emotional life, any aspect of your life comes down to this sense of psychological strength or emotional fitness. And what I mean by that is this. Discipline never works long term. Never. What works is when you become addicted to something positively new. You trade one addiction for another. When you shift from having to doing something to wanting to do something. So our focus is how to make that happen. But I'd say this to you. If you want to change a relationship, the number one thing you have to do is master your own emotions. If you don't do that, forget it. There's no hope. And what's wonderful, though, is it's easy to do if you know how. But none of us have ever been taught really emotional leadership. Emotional management is the very minimum, much less how to direct and shape ourselves. I don't mean faking your emotions. I don't mean pushing them down. I don't believe in positive thinking, although you may think that from watching some of the media coverage. I am not into positive thinking. I'm not here tonight to tell you to go to your garden and say, there's no weeds, there's no weeds, there's no weeds, there's no weeds. I'm very clear that I believe that life is about leadership and being truthful to yourself. And so I believe, number one, that the mandate for any great relationship and the mandate for anybody to lead their own life and not be a follower is you got to see things as they are, but not worse than they are. Because that's where most people go. That's where they go in relationship. That's why they start to tear it down. That's why the relationship starts to break down, because people get scared when it isn't working out, and then they make it worse than it is so they don't have to try. Because they don't want to try again and be disappointed. They don't want to feel that sense of rejection. They don't want to feel that sense of failure. So most people make it much worse than it is. People tell me all the time, oh, I'm skeptical or I'm pessimistic. I said, no, you're gutless. It takes no guts. It takes no courage to be a pessimist, to say it's not going to work, to try to find out what's wrong. What's wrong is always available. It's always what's right. So I'm not into positive thinking, but I am into intelligence. And intelligence says, see it as it is. Don't make it worse than it is. I mean, people all the time say, my problem is I'm big bone. No, you're freaking fat. Tell the truth. What is this big bone story? The only way it gets better is if you can see how it is. Don't make it worse than it is. Don't try to make it so it's impossible to change. That's not true. It's not true at all. The second mandate, I think, to changing anything in your life, to leading your life, is once you see it as it is, not worse than it is, then you got to see it better than it is. Because that's the thing that's missing from most relationships. There's no vision. I mean, without a vision, in the Bible it says people what? Perish. And when a relationship has no vision for greater than where they are, that relationship is going downhill, if not destroyed. I believe that every relationship, every part of life, every part of a human being needs a compelling future. If the future's not more compelling than today could be tough, but if the future's compelling, we can get there. And that's what every leader does. And every one of you in this room, and I know some of you are here, I guess, from the general public as well, just for your own relationships, I really acknowledge you for. But I know that you're from the military here, I know the therapists here, people from all walks of life, you're all leaders. What's your job? To lead. Your job is to help people see it as it is, not worse than it is. What's your job? Help them create a compelling future. See it better than it is, so there's a reason to give my all again. Otherwise, there's just no juice. There's no energy. Why? They'll go through the motions, complain with each other, not really believe it's going to work, and nothing will change. And then finally, the third step that we've all got to do if we're going to change our life or anybody else's is make it the way we see it. And that's where strategy comes in. I try to take things that are complex and make them as simple as possible. I've noticed most people in the psychological world try to make it as complex as humanly possible. Because it makes us feel so sophisticated when we can talk with all these complex words and elements and so forth, and we can really, we got our degrees and we're somebody. But you know what? That doesn't help anybody. So I look for a nickel word to get to the heart of something. I've tried to take something complex and make it simple so that people really will apply it. And that's the focus here. Let me show you in 2 seconds flat why the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. I call it the success cycle. Real fast. Draw yourself 4 squares, put them up on the screen here. You'll see, as I do this, take a quick look. You'll notice you've got the word potential up in the left-hand square. Up in the right-hand square is the word action. Bottom right is the word results. Bottom left is the word belief, or another word for that would be a sense of certainty. Potential, action, belief, results. And notice there's arrows in a clockwise fashion where they just keep feeding each other over and over and over again. So again, it's potential, action, results, belief, or another word for that would be certainty. Now, did you ever notice how rich people tend to get richer and poor people to get poorer? And I don't just mean rich in financial terms. I mean people that are rich emotionally. Did you ever notice how happy people tend to get happier? And depressed people tend to get more depressed? How many found this to be true? Say aye. It's because of the power of momentum and what I'm about to show you. So let me show you something here. What's the potential of any human being? You tell me, quick. Unlimited. Do most people's results reflect that true potential? Yes or no? No way. Why? Because most people aren't taking enough what? But is it possible to take a lot of action and still get lousy results? What if you got a salesman that works for you and they walk out and they knock on 100 doors and they say, you wouldn't want to buy anything from me, would you? Or they don't say that verbally, but they say it non-verbally. Is that going to affect their results? Yes or no? So it's not enough even to take enough action, because when we believe it's not going to work or we're uncertain, does that affect how much of our potential we tap? Yes or no? See, if you don't think it's going to work, you're not going to put out a bunch of your energy when you think it's going to fail. And by the way, when you're not sure, you tap little potential. Do you take little or a lot of action? When you're not sure, when you think it's not going to work, do you take massive action or little action? Now, when you take little potential with little action, what kind of results do you get? Little lousy results. And when you get lousy results, what does that do to your belief? You go, see, I told you it wasn't going to work. Told you it was a waste of time. And then, by the way, when you have less belief, how much more potential do you take? More or less? If it's possible, you tap less potential, more or less action. Less. And what happens to your results? They get even what? And now they got worse results. What's that do to your belief? And by the way, now you see the current economy. Isn't it true? Everybody out there is going, oh my God, the results are so bad, it's going to get worse in the future. So I better pull in my horns. There's less potential. So I'm not going to push as hard. I'm not going to take much action. Oh my God, I'm getting lousy results with little potential action. Oh my God, it's going to get worse. That's what creates a recession, depression, whatever you want to call it. How do you change that? A lot of people, and even a lot of businesses say, well, gosh, we train our people. Who's ever done this? You train your person, they do well for a while, and then they drop off in their skill set. I don't care if it's sales. I don't care if it's a technical skill, having to do with accounting or something on the computer. Who's experienced this with people you work with? Say aye. Now you're highly motivated. It's your business, or you're the leader in the business, or you're the manager, or you're the head of department, or whatever. So you got a lot of drive. So you bring emotion to the table and you do enough repetition that you master it. They don't. If you give up on them, you're losing and missing out on what it takes to train someone. So here's how training looks. In the beginning of training, when you first start doing something, how fast do people learn and make shifts? Slow or rapid? Huge rapid change happens, right? There's this giant growth that occurs. Now, what eventually happens to anybody when they start to learn something? A new sport, a new business, a new relationship. What do they get to? What do you call it? Plateau. So think of it this way. Some people, their philosophy of life is dabbling. Here's what a dabbler does. They take on a sport like, let's say, tennis. And when they're brand new, they know nothing about tennis. They don't know how to hold the racket. They don't know how to swing. They don't know how to keep score. They think love is an emotion when it's a zero, right? There's nothing, right? But from not knowing anything, in a short time with a little bit of training, do they get pretty damn good, yes or no? If this is 100% mastery and this is zero, they might go to 20 or 30% growth like that within a few days, a few weeks. How many follow what I'm saying here? Say aye. Now what's interesting is, will they top out, yes or no? There'll be a point in which they plateau. What's a plateau? It's when you're doing the same amount of effort, but you're not getting the same level of reward. You're not making the same progress. So in the beginning, how hard is it to make progress when you're a brand new company? I mean, creating a product is progress. Selling your first customers is progress. Getting your first account is progress. Pretty easy, right? When you're in a new relationship, just learning about each other and connecting and being intimate, there's progress, right? In playing tennis, taking up a sport, there's so much progress. But in every human being's experience, there's a point where you're working just as hard, but not making so much progress, and people don't like that. That's why I told you this. And what some people do at that point, if they're a dabbler, they decide to quit. This is obviously the wrong job for me. This is obviously the wrong sport. This is obviously the wrong partner. I shouldn't be in a relationship with this person. The minute they get to a point where they're not being fed, their ego is not being fed, they're not growing, they quit. And so if this was, for example, a dabbler who was in a position of tennis, they might quit tennis and now they say, you know what, I'm not a tennis player, I'm going to do racquetball. And they get so excited about racquetball because like, oh, this is cool, look at this. Because within a few days, what happens to everybody? They start from zero and what happens? Lots of what? Tell me, lots of progress, which feels really good, really fast. They didn't know how to racket. They didn't know how to turn. There were walls all around them and a ceiling. In a few days, bam, they're smashing off the back wall and the side wall. They're doing things Z's. And I mean, it's really cool. Plus, they get a new outfit and stuff, so they look cool. They got goggles. They join a new club. There's all this progress and stuff. So guess what? Grow, 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 grow. Everything's great, 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 great. But eventually, who knows what happens? Eventually, they hit a plateau. And guess what? Rather than training themselves further for mastery, what do? They say it's the wrong sport. I shouldn't do this. I shouldn't be a racquetball player. And if I was going to show you as an example, you grab this real quick. If they've gone out and they've made all this progress, they're real happy. They go, go, go. They're growing, growing, growing. Boink. They hit this plateau. Wrong sport. Not a tennis player. Go up like this. Boink, racquetball. All of a sudden, working hard, not getting the result. Wrong thing. Wrong relationship. Wrong job. Wrong mission. So then they go out and play golf and they go, boom. They don't even get the progress. And they go, I didn't need to use the F word that many more times in my life, right? You know, different piece. Now that's what a dabbler does. And by the way, dabblers by their nature are unhappy. Think about this. Even with all the economic challenges that exist, most people in North America for sure have a better quality of life than 95% of the planet. 95% of the planet is living on what? How much? 2/3 of the planet, I should say, is living on $2 a day. Your worst nightmare is somebody else's greatest dream. Most of the planet's greatest dream. Your idea of economic downfall is somebody's dream. That's the truth. And so what happens, though, is, would you agree we have more choices, more freedoms, more opportunities today than any time in human history, yes or no? Yes. Are most people happy? Is their happiness tied to the quality of life they really have? Because we're a world now that's shallow. Most people are dabblers. They try something for a while, doesn't work out, they do something else. Now, you wouldn't be in this room for 5 days if you were a dabbler, but how many of you got to deal with some of these dabblers out there? Say I. Dabblers are the people you want to make sure you keep off your team or get off quickly, because they're going to quit anyway. And the time, energy, and effort it takes to train a dabbler is the same energy you could have a platinum player. And we're going to show you some ways to do that later on. But let me show you another path for a second before we show you the rest of the training effect. Let's take the path of what I call a stressor. Here's the stressor's philosophy. I find the way. Who can relate to this? Say I. I'm going to find the way. I'm going to achieve it. So they take up a sport like tennis, and it goes like this, and they're doing really, really well, and it's going really good, but eventually, boink, they hit a plateau. Here's the difference. Does the stressor quit? Ever quit? Yes or no? Absolutely not. What does the stressor do when it doesn't work out? What do? Do they settle for it? What if they actually get a little worse for a short time? What happens? They really get stressed when they go, screw this, I'm going to find a way, I'm going to break through, I'm going to learn a book, I'm going to find someone, I'm going to get a coach, I'm going to make this thing happen, I'm going to find a way, I'm going to find whatever it takes to make this thing happen. Poosh! And they break through, ladies and gentlemen. Come on, they break through, ladies and gentlemen. Who knows what I'm talking about here? Say I. And by the way, they break through, and all of a sudden they start making progress, and they're so happy, and all of a sudden, guess what happens? Boink. And they go, damn! How the hell, well, how could that happen? I've been working my tail off. I just had this breakthrough. I just worked through this thing. I just fought through it. But by the way, do they hit another plateau? Yes or no? So, what happens here? Do they give up? Do they quit? Do they go, it's the wrong sport? What does the stressor do? They stress out, shit, I'm gonna find a way, I'm gonna make this thing happen, I gotta make this thing, come on, figure something out, let's find this thing, I'm gonna work hard, I'm gonna make more calls, I'm gonna make this thing happen. And all of a sudden, eventually, what happens? Poof! Ladies and gentlemen, they break through again, come on now. And by the way, they eventually get where they want to be. The problem is, they're so stressed out by the time they get there, they're so exhausted, they can't enjoy it. Every person in this room who described failure described it for the following reasons. And I gave all the reasons. Time, money, network we don't have, people we don't have, not the right management, not the right people, right? We don't have the resource. And they went through this whole thing. I said, what all these things, not of Supreme Court justices, what they all have in common is you're all saying we didn't have the resources to succeed. Money is a resource. Time is a resource. Technology is a resource. People is a resource. Experience is a resource. Supreme Court justices are so many resources, right? And they all agreed. I said, here's the only problem. I said, in my experience, and you correct me if you're wrong, and I want an honest answer. When we get out of ourselves and we look at human beings and their ability to succeed or fail, how many people you've ever met who did not have the resources and they beat somebody who had all the resources? I said, resources, when you look at the most powerful and effective people in history, were never the problem. They didn't have the resources, but they got them. How do people get resources when they don't have them? And the answer is, they're resourceful. The ultimate resource is resourcefulness. That's what makes someone successful. And here's what's great about resourcefulness. Who has it within them? Who? Who? Every human being, but the question is whether you access it or not. Now, strategic innovation is different than just constant, never-ending improvement. Constant, never-ending improvement is a very, very important principle. If you're not constantly improving, you're definitely going to be passed up by your competition. But if you're thinking about strategic innovation, what it really means to me is rewriting the rules for competition within an industry, within an area. When you change how people compete, when you change the rules, you take over that industry. You shift completely the game. So in my industry, the vast majority of people spoke and still do for 1 to 3 hours, which many of you yesterday wish I was one of those people. But that's usually it, because what it was is about inspiration, right? It's inspire people. And what happened for me is 90% of them are an hour or 90 minutes. And I was like, it's wonderful. That's a useful tool. But, inspiration is like motivation. Motivation's nice, and it's like a bath. It doesn't last, but you still take a bath every day. But my view was, how do I get people into immersion? How do I put people in an experience where their life really changes? And so I changed the game, and people never even considered saying, we're going to do 3 or 4 days and nights where you're going to go 50 hours. No one will sit there. They won't sit for a 3-hour movie that someone spent $200 million on. But I changed the game. I changed the rules because once people got the result, even if in the beginning it was tough on them, by the end, the level of transformation was so huge, it changed the rules, it changed the game, it changed the size, it gave me a brand, it let me dominate an industry because when people walk up to me throughout my life, the number one phrase, you can see me anywhere in the world, dozen times a day, not in a seminar, I mean just walking around is, oh my God, Tony Robbins, you changed my life. It's like, I always say, you changed, but thanks for the credit, I'm glad I helped. But they'll say that like clockwork, every single time. That's different than I like your product. That's different than I enjoyed your seminar. You changed my life. That changes the rules for competition. That created a different way of competing. Now, I didn't do it to compete. I did it because my passion was I love people, and I don't want them just to be inspired for the moment. I want to make sure they really have the tools, the skills, the ability, the shift that creates a lasting change in their life, and I wouldn't settle for anything less. So you don't have to do it to compete. You strategically innovate because you're obsessed with meeting the needs of your clients. Is it the single most important skill in life? We hate the word selling, so I'll give you a word that it really is that doesn't have the negative connotation. It's the word that all leaders have. What would that word be? Influence. What changes companies is leaders. The only way to change a company is leadership. If I want to change a company that I own and I want to make a shift in that company, the number one thing I'm going to do is shifting leadership. That might be taking leaders to a different level. That might bring new leaders in. That might be new leaders of new voices, with new perspectives, with new skill sets, new directions. But we need to take things to another level. Leaders solve problems and leaders maximize resources. If you're going to solve problems, you can't do it yourself or it would have already been solved. You have to get others to help you to do it. That requires influence. True? If you're going to get people to maximize resources, that requires influence. If you're going to get people to partner with you, provide you resources, capital, suppliers, anything, that requires influence. If you're going to have an impact on your kids or your community or the world, that requires influence. There is no more important skill of leadership than influence. And yet most of us think of it like selling, and as a result, we don't master influence. So I'm not here today to try and get you to become a master of influence in 45 minutes or so am I chatting with you here because we have so many of the speakers. This is the area of life I am most focused on. Because I know that if you can't influence, you can't lead. But if you can influence powerfully, intelligently, with integrity, there's no limit to whatever you can envision and what you can make real. And if your influence becomes not just you as the influence, but you're able to influence systems, people, company, culture. If you can turn other people into influencers, now whatever you vision about can be made into a reality. And so as a skill of influence, we got to ask ourselves, how many agree leaders are what change companies? Raise your hand if you agree with that. Say aye. Aye. And leaders' number one skill is influence. If you agree, say aye. Aye. But then the question becomes, how do you influence? If I can be part of what helps you, but you do the major work or you make the final thing, you're going to own it more. So what I would do with people is I'd say, simple, here's your problem. I want you to write down what the problem is and describe it in 2 sentences max. This is your memo. 2 sentences, crystal clear that anybody will understand it. If you have to write more than 2 sentences, you have to tell them a paragraph, the question doesn't work. It has to be maximum of 2 sentences, ideally 1, so crystal clear anybody can understand it. That's number 1. So you write that down. You write down, define the problem with precision. Describe the problem or the request. And sometimes it's not a problem, sometimes it's a request. Can we turn the air conditioning up? Can we turn it down? Can we have lunch at whatever time? Can we do this? Can we do that? Whatever the request may be. So they write it down. Then the second thing I have them do is describe 3 solutions to their request or problems. 3, and I use keywords, 3 cost-effective, intelligent, viable solutions. Might be viable, time viable, resource viable, whatever the case may be, viability. So what are 3 intelligent, practical, viable solutions that you believe we can implement, to solve this or to meet this need? By the way, why do I have them come up with 3? Someone tell me why. 1 choice is no choice. 2 choices is a dilemma. Until you have 3 choices, you're not at choice. That's my rule in life. You may not like all the choices. Whenever you think you have 1 choice is no choice. If you got 2, you're in a dilemma. There's always at least 3 choices. Plus, I'm making that person become a problem solver. If I solve the problem, they'll just have a new problem for me to solve. But if I can teach them to be a problem solver, the game changes. How many follow? Now, sometimes this is less efficient, but with a mass audience, it was very efficient. And then they turn that in, and then I then have a choice. I could now respond back by saying, circle, I accept your request, or I think solve the problem, we'll do it with your number one. Or I could modify it, I'm willing to do that, but I think we need to do this and this is the way to do it. Or I could reject it and tell them why. And then we'd have this communication. It was very efficient. This is very different than, tell me what you think we should do in a suggestion box. So now, tell us your question and then tell us at least 3 answers.